The Science Lab. Experiments in a Science Lab. Introduction. Once upon a time, in a small town, there was a school called Greenfield Academy. It was known for having the best science lab in the entire region. The students loved going to the science lab because they could do many fun experiments there. The lab was full of interesting tools, colorful liquids, and strange powders that could do amazing things when mixed together. Meet the characters. This story is about three friends, Anna, Ben, and Carlos. They were in the same class and always worked together on projects. Anna was very curious and loved to ask questions. Ben was good at reading and understanding instructions. Carlos was very careful and liked to make sure everything was safe. One day, their science teacher, Mrs. Taylor, announced a big project. She told the class, "We are going to have a science fair. Each group will need to come up with an experiment and present it to the whole school." Anna, Ben, and Carlos were excited but also nervous. They wanted to come up with something really interesting, but they didn't know what to do. They decided to meet in the science lab after school to come up with ideas. Brainstorming ideas. After school, the three friends met in the lab. Mrs. Taylor was there helping other students, but she smiled and said, "Feel free to use anything in the lab for your experiment, but remember to be safe." The lab was a magical place for them. There were shelves full of beakers, test tubes, and jars with labels like sodium bicarbonate and citric acid. There was also a big poster on the wall that showed the scientific method, which Mrs. Taylor always talked about. "Let's start by thinking of something cool," Anna said. "How about we make a volcano that erupts?" Ben suggested. "Everyone does that," Carlos replied. "We need something different." They looked around the lab for inspiration. Then Anna saw a strange plant in a pot by the window. It had big, green leaves and small red flowers. "What if we do something with plants?" she asked. Ben thought about it and said, "Maybe we could test how different liquids affect the growth of plants." Carlos nodded. "That sounds interesting. We could use water, milk, juice, and soda to see which one helps the plant grow best." Starting the experiment. They decided to start their experiment the next day. Mrs. Taylor gave them for small plants all the same size. Each plant would get a different liquid every day for 2 weeks. They carefully labeled the pots: plant 1 water, plant to milk, plant 3 juice, and plant for soda. Every day, they went to the lab to water the plants. They measured the amount of liquid carefully using a measuring cup and recorded the height of each plant. They also wrote down any changes they noticed in the plants, like the color of the leaves or how strong the stems were. At first, all the plants seemed to be growing fine. The water plant grew tall and strong. The milk plant was also growing, but it started to smell a little funny. The juice plant's leaves were turning a bit yellow, and the soda plant wasn't growing much at all. Unexpected results. After a week, things started to get more interesting. The plant with water was still the healthiest. The milk plant had white spots on the leaves, and the smell was getting worse. The juice plant's leaves were now turning brown, and the soda plant had stopped growing completely. In fact, the soda plant's leaves started to curl up and turn black. "This is strange," Anna said. "I thought juice would be good for plants because it has fruit in it." "Maybe there's too much sugar," Carlos suggested. "And the soda must be too acidic for the plant to handle." Ben looked at their notes and said, "We should test the pH levels of the liquids. That might help us understand what's happening." They found some pH strips in the lab and tested the liquids. The water had a neutral pH of 7, the milk was slightly acidic, the juice was more acidic, and the soda was very acidic. "This explains a lot," Ben said. "The plants can't handle the high acidity of the juice and soda, and that's why they're not growing well." Preparing for the presentation. By the end of 2 weeks, the results were clear. The plant with water was the healthiest and tallest. The milk plant had mold growing on the soil, the juice plant was almost dead, and the soda plant was completely withered. Anna, Ben, and Carlos were ready to present their findings at the science fair. They made a big poster with pictures of the plants and charts showing how much they grew each day. They also wrote a report explaining the experiment and what they learned about how different liquids affect plant growth. Mrs. Taylor was very proud of them. "You've done an excellent job," she said. "You used the scientific method to test your hypothesis, and you learned something important about how plants grow. I'm sure everyone will be impressed with your presentation." Part 2. The Science Lab. Experiments in a Science Lab. The day of the science fair. The day of the science fair finally arrived. The gymnasium at Greenfield Academy was buzzing with excitement. All the students had set up their projects, and the room was filled with colorful posters, models, and displays. Anna, Ben, and Carlos had their station near the front, where they had carefully arranged there for plants, and their big poster showing the results of their experiment. The 3 friends were a little nervous, but also excited. They had worked hard on their project, and they were proud of what they had accomplished. They knew their experiment was interesting and that they had learned a lot. But they also knew that there were many other good projects at the fair. Mrs. Taylor walked by to check on them. She smiled and said, "You 3 have done a fantastic job. Remember, it's not just about winning a prize, it's about learning something new and sharing that knowledge with others." The judges arrive. Soon, the judges started walking around the room. They were teachers from different schools, scientists from the local university, and even a few people from the town who loved science. The judges had clipboards and were taking notes as they talked to each group of students. When the judges reached Anna, Ben, and Carlos, they smiled and asked, "So, what is your experiment about?" Anna stepped forward and explained, "Our experiment is about how different liquids affect the growth of plants." We used water, milk, juice, and soda to water for identical plants and observed how they grew over 2 weeks. Ben added, we recorded the height of the plants every day and noted any changes in the color and health of the leaves. Carlos handed the judges their report and said, we also tested the pH levels of the liquids to understand why some plants grew better than others. The judges looked at the plants. The one with water was tall and green, while the others looked much worse. The soda plant, in particular, was almost completely black and shriveled up. One of the judges asked, why do you think the soda plant did so poorly? Carlos explained, soda is very acidic, and we think the acid harmed the plant. The sugar in the soda might have also caused problems. Another judge asked, did anything surprise you during your experiment? Anna replied, yes, we were surprised by how quickly the juice and soda started to hurt the plants. We thought they might grow at least a little, but they stopped almost immediately. The judges nodded, took a few more notes, and thanked the group for their hard work. As they moved on to the next project, the three friends let out a sigh of relief. I think that went well, Ben said. Yeah, but now we just have to wait, Anna replied, exploring the other projects. With the judging over, the three friends decided to walk around and look at the other projects. There were so many different experiments. One group had built a model of a volcano that erupted with baking soda and vinegar. Another had studied how different types of music affected people's moods. There was even a project that showed how robots could be programmed to solve puzzles. As they walked around, they saw that some projects were very complicated and others were simple, but all of them were interesting in their own way. Anna, Ben, and Carlos were impressed by how creative and smart their classmates were. They also noticed that some projects had lots of decorations and fancy models, but the three friends weren't too worried. They knew their experiment was strong because it was based on good science, and they had learned a lot from it. The announcement of the winners. Finally, it was time for the awards ceremony. All the students gathered in the middle of the gymnasium, and the principal, Mr. Jenkins, stepped up to the microphone. He thanked everyone for their hard work and praised all the projects for being creative and well done. Then, he began announcing the winners. There were awards for different categories, like Best Presentation, Most Creative, and Most Original Idea. The students clapped as each winner was called up to receive their ribbon or trophy. As the ceremony went on, Anna, Ben, and Carlos started to feel a bit anxious. Their category was Best Scientific Experiment, and it hadn't been announced yet. And now, Mr. Jenkins said, we have the award for Best Scientific Experiment. This award goes to the team that showed the best use of the scientific method, clear results, and a strong understanding of their subject. The room was quiet as everyone waited to hear the winner. This year, the award goes to Anna, Ben, and Carlos for their project on how different liquids affect plant growth. The three friends couldn't believe it. They had won! They walked up to the stage together, their hearts pounding with excitement. Mr. Jenkins handed them a shiny trophy and 3 blue ribbons. The crowd applauded loudly, and Mrs. Taylor beamed with pride. "Congratulations," Mr. Jenkins said as he shook their hands. "You did an excellent job." Celebrating their success. After the ceremony, the gymnasium was full of students and parents talking and celebrating. Anna, Ben, and Carlos were surrounded by their classmates, who congratulated them on their win. Mrs. Taylor came over and said, "I'm so proud of you all. You worked hard, stayed focused, and most importantly, you learned a lot. That's what science is all about." The three friends thanked her and then posed for pictures with their trophy and ribbons. Their parents were there too, taking pictures and telling them how proud they were. Afterward, the three friends decided to celebrate by going to their favorite ice cream shop. As they sat there eating their ice cream, they talked about everything they had learned from their experiment. Anna said, "I'm glad we chose something different. It was fun to see how the plants reacted to the liquids." Ben added, "And we learned a lot about how important it is to ask questions and test our ideas. Science isn't just about getting the right answer, it's about learning from the process." Carlos smiled and said, "I think this was the best project we've ever done. I can't wait to see what we do next year, looking to the future." As the sun set and the day came to an end, the three friends walked home, talking excitedly about future experiments they could do. They knew that this was just the beginning of their journey in science. There were so many more questions to ask and so much more to discover. Anna, Ben, and Carlos had not only won a prize, they had also discovered a love for science that would stay with them forever. They knew that no matter what they did in the future, they would always be curious, always ask questions, and always be ready to explore the world around them. And who knows, maybe one day, one of them would become a famous scientist, making discoveries that would change the world. But for now, they were just three friends who loved science, and that was more than enough. The end.